Despite the highlights and lowlights of the evening, when I arrived home, I fell into a sound sleep the moment my head hit the pillow. I woke the next morning around 11 a.m. feeling strangely refreshed and, to my pleasant surprise, without the nagging back pain that I had been saddled with over the last several weeks. Over breakfast, I mentally replayed the previous night's events, and by the time I finished my second cup of coffee, I realized that I had concluded the evening by acting like a complete jerk. Being that I didn't have to be at the store until 1 p.m., I grabbed my jacket and went to find Terry, hoping that I would be able to make amends for my previous night's sour behavior. He is usually not hard to find, and today was no exception. As I cruised down CR 35, the old coast road, I spotted him just outside the town line, about a half mile from where his camper was parked. I turned my truck around and drove back to the town stairs and parking area that I had passed a few hundred yards back. Upon parking, I quickly made my way down the stairs and up the beach to where he was fishing. I guess he saw me coming because he was already waiting for me when I arrived. As I walked up to him, I could tell that he was not sure what kind of mood I was in, so I decided to take it easy on him. "I hear some idiot caught a big fish around these parts last night," I said. The twinkle in his eye said that he was catching my drift. "Actually, it was a very big fish," he said. "And I hear this idiot let it go. Why do you think he did that?" I asked. Taking the bait, he replied, "You wouldn't understand." With that, I just shook my head and smiled. "Terry, I'm very sorry about the way I acted last night," I said. "I know that it was something very important to you and that you wouldn't have insisted I release the fish without good reason. It's just that I don't understand any of this. I don't know what it is that you are talking about. Look, I'll keep my mouth shut about catching that fish. I just wish I knew what I was doing it for is all." Terry looked out at the ocean before turning back and addressing me. "You do not need to explain or apologize," he said. "The nature of a test is to bring out the best and the worst of a person. But you are wrong about one thing," he said. "What happened last night is not important to me. It is important to you," he said, pointing in my direction. "I do not know what form your favor will take, as it is always different for each one who receives it, but it will make itself known to you in due time." He then nodded in the direction of the sea. "You should go get your rod," he said with a grin. "There are plenty of fish around today, and you get to keep these, maybe even make a little money." The humorous barb was not lost on me. "No can do today," I replied. "It's my turn to close the store, and I have to relieve my wife pretty soon, or it's the doghouse for me. But I'll probably be back tonight, though," I said, as I turned and waved goodbye over my shoulder. With a sense of relief and the burden of guilt removed from my back, I left the beach and headed back into town. I made it to the shop with time to spare and sent my wife off early. The refreshed feeling that I awoke with sustained me through my uneventful afternoon shift, and was still with me as I locked the door at 5 p.m. and headed home. When I arrived, I was met at the door by a wonderful aroma that indicated my wife was well into cooking dinner. With my stomach growling in anticipation, I walked into the kitchen to say hello, and more importantly, see what was on the menu. As soon as I started lifting the lids off the pots, I was ordered out of the kitchen and banished to the den. "Go put on the TV and see what you can find out about that storm coming up the coast," she demanded. "Storm? What storm?" I asked. She stopped what she was doing and just looked at me with that "I can't believe what I just heard" look. "You're kidding, right?" she said. "It's been all over the news since yesterday." Laughing at my no doubt dumbfounded expression, she resumed her cooking as I wandered into the den to get caught up. Various network news channels were carrying the story, and in a period of about 20 minutes or so, I was able to piece together the details of the storm. It appeared to be a rather unusual storm in that it wasn't very big, but was moving very fast. It was bouncing between being categorized as a tropical storm and a Category 1 hurricane. It had started as a tropical depression, spun off the coast of Africa, and lazily made its way across the Atlantic. Off the coast of South Carolina, it intensified into a tropical storm and was projected to make landfall somewhere near the border. Then it did something very peculiar. The storm actually condensed, intensified, and completely changed direction and speed. It was racing up the coast faster than any previously recorded storm, and if it remained on course, was expected to make landfall right in our backyard tomorrow afternoon. All the weather forecasters seemed at a loss to explain the storm's unusual behavior. One weather forecaster referred to it as a weather anomaly, while another called it a storm with a purpose. Regardless of what they called it, there would be no fishing for me tonight. After dinner, I called Will McCarty up and asked if he would help me put plywood up over the store windows, and it was agreed that he would meet me there at around 9 o'clock. I left for the store shortly after that to get everything ready for the boarding up party. The store was storm ready by midnight, and I briefly thought about going fishing, but upon returning home, I opted to go straight to bed instead. I figured tomorrow was going to be a long day. The next morning seemed like any other morning weather-wise, sunny and pleasant, without any indication of the impending storm. As I arose and peeked out the window, I began hoping that the storm had made another radical departure from its projected course and was now on its way to becoming somebody else's problem. My hopes were dashed by the morning news. The storm was still racing up the coast, straight as an arrow, and it looked like our little town had the bullseye on its back. For the rest of the morning and into the early afternoon, I busied myself with readying the house for the coming storm. During the process, I started thinking about Terry and the precarious location of his camper on the bluffs. After buttoning everything up around the house, I asked my wife if she would have a problem with some extra company when the storm hit. Although finding my request a bit curious, she gave her consent, and even though I wasn't sure I would be able to talk Terry into it, I had to at least try. I left the house just before the leading edge of the storm made landfall. As I pulled up next to Terry's camper, I found him standing on the bluffs a short distance from his front door, gazing in the direction of the storm. I got out of the truck and walked toward where he was standing. As I approached, I noticed that he was holding something in his hand, rubbing it slowly. It appeared to be something hanging around his neck, and as I neared, he tucked it back into his parka and turned to greet me. "It is coming," he said. One look told me that something had changed. There was a look of excitement in his eyes that I had never seen before in the short time since I had made his acquaintance. I just assumed that he was talking about the storm. "Yeah, it's been all over the news since yesterday," I replied. "I don't have a TV," he said, smiling as he nodded toward the camper. "No AC." "Well, radio then," I asked. Again the big grin. "Radio has been broken for 9 years," he said. I just shrugged my shoulders and laughed. "All right then, how the hell do you know about the storm?" I demanded. He glanced back over the ocean for a moment before turning to face me again. "Nature will always tell you what is coming. You need only to listen to what it is telling you." Smiling, I just shook my head and muttered something under my breath about more Indian mumbo-jumbo. "What was that?" he asked. "You wouldn't understand," I countered. We both started laughing, and he nodded toward me in that touche-type gesture. After a bit of relief, I got down to the business that drew me there in the first place. "Look, Terry, I want you to know that when it hits, you are more than welcome to weather the storm at my house." As he looked at me, his eyes revealed that he had been completely taken off guard. He bowed his head slightly. "I thank you," he replied. "I am truly honored by your offer." He hesitated briefly before continuing. "But I think you do not understand the meaning of this event." "Not understand?" I asked, perplexed. "Yes," he replied. As he turned seaward, his eyes took on the 100-yard stare we had come to know from his early days in our town. "It comes with the storm," he said. "The nexus that I have been seeking for so many years. It is finally at hand. It will happen today, just as it happened in the vision of my long-distant past." He pointed toward the horizon. "It is near," he said. Looking out over the ocean, I could clearly see the black wall cloud of the storm fast approaching from the south. "I must get ready," Terry said excitedly as he walked back toward his camper. "Ready? What do you mean ready?" I asked, still staring at the approaching storm. He stopped and turned to face me. I must get to Bolton Beach by the town. This is where it will arrive. I am sure of this. He turned once again toward his camper and went through the door. Moments later he emerged, rod in hand, and headed toward Widow's Path. I ran over and blocked his way. "You're going fishing now? I don't get this." As he stood there impatiently, I could see the excitement building in his eyes. "Please trust me, Ray," he began. "I don't really have the time to explain it to you now. You are welcome to come and bear witness if you wish, but I must go now. I must be ready." He walked around me and again headed for the path as I called out to him, "Why don't you just drive there?" Even with his back to me, I could tell he was laughing. "And risk losing this prime piece of real estate? No way," he said over his shoulder just before his huge form disappeared down the path to the beach.